My wife started being too nice. That's how I knew she was cheating. She slid a handwritten note into my lunch at 7:06 a.m. And that's when I knew. My wife had never packed my lunch in 8 years of marriage, not once, but that morning she kissed my cheek, smiled too wide, and said, "I'm proud of you," like she was reading a line she'd practiced in the mirror. People think cheating looks like lipstick on a collar or late-night texts. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it looks like sudden kindness, like guilt dressed up as love. And I didn't have proof yet, just a quiet, sinking certainty that something in our house had changed. Her name is Maddie Carter. Mine is Jonah. I'm 34, a freelance brand designer who works from home. Maddie was 33, a client relations manager at a mid-sized tech company in Portland. We'd been together 11 years, married for 8, and up until 3 weeks ago I would have told you we were stable, maybe a little routine, but safe, familiar. Then she started being too nice, and that's how my life cracked open. The first time Maddie's new nice showed up, it was small. It was Monday, 6:18 p.m., and I was rinsing dishes when she walked into the kitchen behind me, wrapped her arms around my waist, and whispered, "Thank you for everything you do." I actually froze. Not because I didn't like affection, but because Maddie wasn't the spontaneous gratitude type. She was practical, efficient, the kind of person who showed love by paying bills on time and remembering to book the car's oil change. I turned around and said, "Are you okay?" She laughed lightly. "I'm great. Can't I just be nice?" That's the thing about long relationships. Your partner doesn't have to do something obviously wrong for you to feel that something is off. Sometimes it's the difference that scares you, the deviation from the usual pattern. Over the next 2 weeks, Maddie became a version of herself I didn't recognize. She started buying my favorite snacks, specifically the honey-roasted cashews I only ate around the holidays. She scheduled a date night for us on Thursday at 7:30 at a place I'd once mentioned in passing. She initiated sex twice in 1 week after months of "I'm exhausted." And to anyone else, that might sound like a marriage improving. To me, it sounded like someone trying to balance a scale. The night that made my stomach turn was Friday, 9:42 p.m. We were in bed, the TV playing quietly. Maddie rolled toward me and said, too casually, "Hey, if something ever happened between us, you'd be okay, right? Like, you'd still want me to be happy." I stared at her. "What do you mean, something happened?" She shrugged, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "I don't know. People change. Life changes." I sat up. My heart was beating fast, loud in my own ears. "Maddie," I said, careful, "are you trying to tell me something?" She turned, smiled, again, too wide, and touched my cheek. "No," she said softly, "I just love you." Then she kissed me and went to sleep like she hadn't dropped a grenade into my chest. I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the house settle. The heater clicking, the wind tapping the window, Maddie's breathing even and calm. And the thought that kept looping wasn't "she's cheating." It was "she's preparing me." The next morning, Maddie left her phone face down on the counter while she showered. That alone was unusual. She normally kept it on her at all times like it was an organ. It buzzed once, twice. I didn't grab it immediately. I argued with myself for a full minute like I was debating whether to step off a cliff. Then I picked it up and saw the notification preview. "Can't stop thinking about last night." From a contact saved as Evan Vendor. I worked with vendors. Maddie didn't. My hands didn't tremble. Something crystallized inside me. I didn't open the message. I didn't need to. The preview was enough to confirm what my body already knew. I set the phone down exactly where it was and walked into the bathroom. I stared at myself in the mirror, trying to make sense of how calm my face looked when my insides felt like they were falling apart. Maddie came out of the shower, towel around her hair, humming. I asked very quietly, "Who's Evan?" She paused, just half a second too long. Then she smiled again. "The vendor guy," she said lightly, "from work." I nodded slowly. "Why is he texting you about last night?" Her eyes widened, her mouth opened. Then she forced a laugh. "Oh my God, Jonah! He meant the meeting, the presentation. You're so paranoid." Paranoid. There it was, the first defensive move, the first attempt to flip the problem onto me. I stared at her until her smile started to shake at the edges. "I'm not paranoid," I said. "I'm paying attention." She crossed her arms. "So what, you don't want me to be nice anymore? You'd rather I be cold and distant again?" And there it was, the second move. Turn the suspicion into an insult. I didn't accuse her. Not yet. I didn't have enough. I'd learned from watching my parents divorce that accusations without proof Just give the liar time to build a better lie. So I did what she didn't expect. I stepped back. I'm going for a walk, I said, grabbing my jacket. Maddie watched me leave, her face unreadable. Outside, the air was cold and wet. The streetlights reflected on the pavement. My stomach was a knot. My heart felt like it was trying to punch out of my ribs. 11 years, 8 married, and suddenly my wife was being too nice, like kindness could erase betrayal. But the real betrayal hadn't even happened yet. Not the one that broke me, because 3 days later, I found the thing she didn't think I'd ever see. And it didn't just prove she was cheating, it proved she thought I was stupid. On Tuesday, 3:17 p.m., Maddie texted me, "Staying late, client emergency, don't wait up." It was believable. Maddie worked late often, but my body didn't believe it. I did something I'd never done before. I checked our shared calendar, mostly out of habit, mostly to see if there was any client emergency scheduled. There wasn't. Then I remembered something mundane and deadly. Our internet provider app was logged in on my phone. It showed devices connected to our home Wi-Fi. I normally used it to troubleshoot when Netflix lagged. That day, I opened it because my brain needed something solid, something factual. At 3:26 p.m., my phone showed a new device connected, Evan's iPhone, in my house. While Maddie claimed she was at work, my mouth went dry. I stared at the screen until the letters stopped looking real. Then I put my phone down, sat at the kitchen table, and listened. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the fridge. I checked the timestamp again, then again, 3:26 p.m. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't yell. I didn't do anything dramatic. What stopped me from destroying the house wasn't restraint. It was strategy. I opened my notes app and wrote, Tuesday, 3:26 p.m. Evan's iPhone connected to home Wi-Fi. Maddie text, staying late, possible in-house meetup. Then I did the next thing quietly. I opened our home security app. We had a camera pointed at the front door. Not hidden, not secret. We installed it after a neighbor's car got broken into. I pulled up the playback for 3:20, 3:40 p.m. At 3:24 p.m., Maddie walked in, hair down, work blazer still on. At 3:25 p.m., she looked directly at the camera, adjusted it slightly, just enough to tilt the view away from the porch steps. At 3:27 p.m., a man walked up the driveway, tall, brown hair, confidence in his stride like he'd been there before. Maddie opened the door before he even knocked. Then the feed showed the tilted angle, just the edge of the door, their bodies partially blocked, but I saw enough. His hand on her waist, her leaning into him like it was natural. My hands didn't tremble, my vision did. I sat back and realized something terrifying. This wasn't a first-time mistake. This was routine. I saved the clip, I backed it up to a drive, I emailed it to myself. I didn't want a lost phone or a corrupted file stories later be. Then I started investigating like someone who finally understood the rules. I checked bank statements. There were charges that weren't for us. $187.40 at a restaurant on the waterfront we'd never gone, to $64.12 at a boutique wine shop, $3.12 at the Juniper Hotel, a place Maddie once described as too expensive and pretentious. The Juniper Hotel charge was dated March 8th, a Saturday. I remembered that Saturday. Maddie told me she was at a work retreat. She didn't answer my calls all night. She came home Sunday morning smelling like a different soap. At the time, I told myself I was being insecure. Now I felt like I'd been living inside someone else's lie. I found more. Gift purchases, a men's watch brand I didn't wear, a sports bar tab for $2. Then I made a decision that changed everything. I found Evan. Not by hacking anything, just by searching Maddie's workplace website and LinkedIn. Evan Reese, Strategic Partnerships Consultant. His profile picture had that polished corporate smile that screams, I've never been told no. And there it was, right under his bio. Happily engaged to Lauren. Engaged. My stomach dropped again, but this time it came with something new. Anger that had direction. I found Lauren through tagged photos. Her profile was full of wedding planning posts, dress fittings, venue visits, smiling pictures with Evan, a woman building a future on a foundation of rot. I stared at her page for a long time before I messaged her. I kept it short. Hi, Lauren. I'm Jonah. I'm married to Maddie Carter. I believe Maddie and Evan Reese have been having an affair. I have video evidence and hotel receipts. If you want it, I'll share it. She responded at 11:02 p.m. that same night. Call me, please. Her voice on the phone was tight, like she was holding a scream in her throat. How long? She asked immediately. I'm still figuring that out, I said, but at least 4 months, possibly longer. Lauren went silent. Then she whispered, "Our wedding is in 9 weeks." 9 weeks. I felt sick. We compared timelines. Lauren had access to Evan's calendar. I had access to our bank and security footage. The overlap was like a punch list of betrayal. Evan, late client dinner, equals Maddie girls night. Evan, conference networking, equals Juniper Hotel charge. Evan, vendor visit, equals Evan's iPhone on my Wi-Fi. Lauren's voice turned cold. "He told me he never goes to Portland," she said. I let that sit in the air for a second. "That's interesting," I said softly, "because he's been in my house." She exhaled sharply, like she might break. Then she said something that made my blood run colder than any affair detail. "My name is on a joint account with him," she said, "and I found withdrawals, cash withdrawals, thousands." I sat up. "How much?" $12,600 over the last 3 months, she said, voice shaking. "He said it was for a surprise honeymoon fund." A surprise honeymoon fund? No, that was a deception fund. And suddenly this wasn't just a heartbreak story, it was fraud hiding under romance. Lauren worked in compliance. She knew policy. She knew what companies care about. "Evan's role has strict ethics rules," she said. "If he used company resources for this, he's done." I stared at my laptop, at the neat folder of evidence I'd begun compiling, and felt the numbness shift into purpose. I didn't cry. I simply waited. Because if Maddie thought being too nice would smooth her way out of betrayal, she had no idea I was already 3 moves ahead. I didn't want revenge that made me look unstable. I didn't want to win by becoming someone I didn't recognize. I wanted 3 things: truth on record, a clean exit, consequences that matched their choices. So I made a plan with Lauren, my ally, the other betrayed partner. We agreed on rules. No illegal recordings, no threats, no social media smear campaign. We would stay factual, calm, documented. Phase 1, protect myself. I met with the divorce attorney Melissa Yates on Thursday at 10 o'clock a.m. She looked at the evidence I'd gathered and said, "You're doing this the right way, quietly." I asked about the house, the finances, what I should not do. Melissa told me the line I repeated to myself whenever I felt the urge to explode: "Do not confront until your exit route is prepared." So I did the boring, powerful things. I opened a separate account. I copied documents. I photographed valuables. I changed passwords. I redirected my business income. Because here's the secret about being underestimated. People don't notice what you're building when they assume you're harmless. Maddie always treated my work like a hobby. I was just a designer. But my design studio wasn't small. I'd quietly built it over years. Brand packages, retainers, corporate clients. I didn't brag. I didn't flaunt it. I liked privacy. Maddie didn't know my business revenue last year was $286,000. She thought I depended on her real job. That assumption was my secret weapon. Phase 2, gather undeniable evidence. I didn't follow them around like a movie. I used what I already had. Security camera clips with timestamps, bank statements with hotel charges, Wi-Fi device logs, a printed timeline of lies. Every piece alone could be argued. Together they formed a wall. Phase 3, controlled exposure. Lauren suggested a public exposure at their company event, but I didn't want a screaming scene. Then I remembered Maddie's company hosted quarterly partner mixers at a venue called the Alder Room, a private dining space in a downtown hotel. Maddie had bragged about it once. It's fancy. Important people. Important people. Witnesses. Accountability. So we designed the humiliation cycle carefully. Not cruelly, just inevitably. We wouldn't show everything at once. We'd tighten the noose in stages. First, Maddie realizes I know. Then Evan realizes Lauren knows. Then the company realizes there's risk. Then the social circle realizes who lied. I invited Maddie to dinner first. Not romantic, neutral, calm. Saturday, 7 o'clock p.m. at a quiet restaurant where you can't shout without embarrassing yourself. Maddie arrived wearing a dress she hadn't worn in months. "Wow," she said softly, touching my arm. "You planned this?" I watched her face, the bright smile, the careful sweetness, guilt masquerading as affection. I nodded. "Yes, sit," we ordered. She talked too much, laughing too loudly, as if volume could drown out the truth. Then I placed my phone on the table, opened the security clip, and pressed play. 3:24 p.m. Maddie coming home, tilting the camera, opening the door to Evan, her face drained. "Jonah," she whispered. I paused the video. I didn't cry, I said quietly. I didn't scream. I just started collecting facts. Her hands shook around her water glass. This isn't what it looks like, she said automatically. I slid the Juniper Hotel charge across the table. And this? I asked. Her mouth opened, closed. She looked around the restaurant like she wanted to disappear. Please, she said, voice trembling. Not here. I leaned forward slightly and spoke softly, so only she could hear. Here is exactly where you will answer, I said, because you don't get privacy anymore. You used that privilege to lie. Maddie's eyes filled with tears. It was a mistake, she whispered. I nodded once. How many times? She shook her head. I don't know. You know, I said calmly. How many? Her voice cracked. It was 4, 5. I didn't react. I just said, try again. She stared at me in shock. What? I have a timeline, I said. Try again. Maddie's shoulders sagged like she'd been holding up a wall that finally collapsed. Since January, she whispered. January. That was 9 months of betrayal. 9 months of being too nice whenever guilt spiked. I sat back and felt something heavy settle into place. Not hatred, finality. Okay, I said. Thank you for confirming. We're done. Her head snapped up. What do you mean done? I mean I'm filing, I said. And you're moving out. Maddie's face twisted with panic. Jonah, please. I stood up, calm, paid the bill, and left her sitting there with her untouched food and her collapsing script. Then came phase 4. Lauren sent her evidence to Evan's HR department through proper channels because she knew how to report ethics violations without making it look like revenge. I submitted my own packet to Maddie's company anonymously through their compliance hotline because the affair had happened on company time and Evan's travel spending was suspicious. We didn't lie. We didn't exaggerate. We simply handed the truth to people whose job is to respond to risk. And consequences started moving like dominoes. Maddie texted me at 8:41 a.m. Monday, HR called me into a meeting. What did you do? I replied, I told the truth. Her next message came fast. You're ruining my life. I stared at that line for a long time before I typed, you ruined our marriage, I'm just not hiding it. By Wednesday, Evan was on leave. By Friday, Maddie was working from home suddenly, and then the desperation phase started. Maddie tried to regain control the way she always did, with emotion. She showed up at my office room at home, crying, begging, saying she'd choose me, saying Evan meant nothing, saying she didn't know how it happened. I listened without interrupting. Then I said calmly, you didn't trip into his bed, I told her, yet you walked there, repeatedly. Maddie's face tightened with anger under the tears. You're acting like you're perfect, she snapped. I shook my head. No, I'm acting like I'm done. And then finally the last twist arrived, one that made Maddie's too nice period make sick sense. She hadn't been nice to save the marriage. She'd been nice because she was preparing to take something. It happened on Thursday at 6:55 p.m. when Maddie asked to talk logistics. We met at our house. My attorney said it was okay as long as I stayed calm and documented everything. Maddie sat at the dining table, eyes red, but voice suddenly controlled. I've been thinking, she said. We should sell the house, split everything, start fresh. I stared at her. You want to sell the house immediately? She nodded. It's the cleanest way. Cleanest for her, I realized, because selling quickly would let her cash out before consequences hit fully. I said nothing. Maddie slid a folder across the table. Inside was a draft agreement she'd made without my lawyer. It was filled with little tricks, ambiguous language, generous allocation of assets to her, and a line that made my blood run cold. Jonah acknowledges Maddie's sole financial contribution to household expenses. Sole. As if my income didn't exist. As if I hadn't paid half the mortgage. As if I hadn't built my business. I looked up at her. So this is why you were being nice. Maddie blinked. What? You were softening me up, I said quietly, so I'd sign. Her face hardened. Don't be dramatic. I opened my laptop and turned it toward her, a spreadsheet, detailed, every transfer, every payment I'd made, every invoice from my business, plus something she didn't expect, a letter from my accountant, and another from my attorney, because here was the real trump card. While Maddie thought I was dependent, I'd been quietly creating a trust structure for my business and personal assets, something my late grandfather, a meticulous man, had taught me to do. Not because I was rich, but because I'd seen what messes divorce makes. Maddie stared at the numbers. $286,000 revenue, retainers, proof of my contributions. The color drained from her face. This? She stammered. I've been paying, I said calmly. You just didn't notice because you didn't respect what I do? Maddie's hands trembled. So you're going to take everything? I shook my head. No, I'm going to take what's fair. Then I slid my own folder toward her, prepared by my attorney. Clear terms, fair division, boundaries, dates, and on top one more document, a notice that I'd already filed for divorce at 9:12 a.m. that morning. Her eyes widened. You already filed? She whispered. I nodded. I didn't tell you because you don't get to manage this. Maddie's face cracked. She started to cry, but it was different now. Less performance, more panic. What am I supposed to do? She whispered. I looked at her, and my voice stayed calm. You're going to face the life you chose, I said, and you're going to do it without me. She snapped then, anger flashing. This is because you're embarrassed, she spat, because you can't stand that someone else wanted me. I leaned forward, eyes steady. I'm not embarrassed, I said quietly. I'm insulted because you thought I'd accept scraps of affection and call it love. Maddie looked away, breathing hard. Then I said the last truth bomb. And Evan's fiancée knows, I added. She reported him, not me. Maddie froze. What? Lauren, I said. She's not staying quiet. Maddie's mouth opened, but no sound came out because suddenly, Maddie wasn't the main character in this story anymore. She was just one of the people who made a choice and got caught under the weight of it. The divorce didn't happen overnight. Real life doesn't. But the momentum never stopped after that. Immediate aftermath. Maddie moved into a short-term rental within 2 weeks. Her workplace placed her on a performance review because the investigation didn't just touch Evan. It touched anyone involved. Evan's engagement ended. Lauren didn't do it dramatically. She simply canceled venues, moved money back, and left. Evan was terminated for policy violations tied to misuse of time and expenses, not because of morality. Companies don't care about morality, they care about liability. Our mutual friends split in predictable ways. Some people didn't want drama, which is just another way of saying they didn't want to be inconvenienced by truth. Others checked in on me quietly and consistently. Those were the people I kept. I didn't post about Maddie online. I didn't try to embarrass her publicly beyond what the truth naturally did, because the cleanest revenge isn't humiliation. It's removal. It's making someone live with the space they created. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork. It wasn't dividing furniture. It wasn't even the loneliness. It was accepting that the kindness I missed wasn't real love returning. It was guilt. It was a mask. And once you see that, you start rereading your life. Every extra compliment, every sudden hug, every "I'm proud of you." Not love, damage control. 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning at 7:38 a.m., I sat on my balcony with coffee and watched rain fog the streetlights. My business was stable. I'd taken on 2 new long-term clients. I'd started running again, not to punish myself, but to remind my body it belonged to me. Maddie tried to text twice in those months. Nothing dramatic, just "hope you're okay" messages that felt like she wanted forgiveness without accountability. I didn't answer. Not out of spite, out of peace. Because here's what I learned. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't always arrive with cruelty. Sometimes it arrives with sweetness, a sudden warmth that feels like love, until you realize it's a cover. And if you've ever been in that position, if someone suddenly starts treating you like a prize after years of taking you for granted, don't ignore the feeling in your gut. Pay attention, not because suspicion makes you strong, but because reality does. Final wisdom. I used to think love was about staying, no matter what. Now I know love is also about leaving when loyalty is gone. The best revenge isn't ruining them. It's rebuilding yourself so thoroughly that their choices can't reach you anymore. And the quietest victory is waking up in a life that finally feels honest.